The emergence of modern agricultural science in Japan.
This segment explores the development and impact of Japanese agricultural science during the imperial period, focusing on the rice research led by Japanese scientists and its consequences. From the late 19th to early 20th century, agricultural science rapidly transformed from relying on traditional wisdom to becoming a modern scientific discipline by incorporating advances in biology, chemistry, and engineering. This modern agricultural science began spreading beyond its Western origins to other regions of the world. Japan, along with its colonies, was not an exception. Introduction of dairy farming was a prime example of the westernization of agriculture. Until the Meiji Restoration, many Japanese did not consume meat, mainly due to Buddhist influence. With the wave of westernization, however, the government began actively promoting meat and milk consumption. New meat dishes such as tonkatsu and sukiyaki spread nationwide during the Meiji era due to westernization. Dairy products like milk and cheese were also promoted with the hope of raising physically stronger citizens. The Meiji government strategically established Sapporo Agricultural College in 1876 as a forward base to develop Hokkaido as a center for dairy farming. Meanwhile, rice breeding exemplifies how Western agricultural science was adapted to Japanese climate and environment. Specifically, crossbreeding of rice was challenging in itself. As rice is a self-pollinating plant with enclosed flowers, human intervention is necessary for artificial crossbreeding to improve rice varieties. People had to manually extract the hidden flowers of the female parent, remove the stamens with the scissors, and then apply the male parent's pollen to the female parent's pistil with a brush. Creating a single practical variety requires dozens to hundreds of such crossbreeding combinations, making the labor behind the term artificial hybridization truly immense. Through this arduous process, Japanese agronomists succeeded in artificially crossbreeding rice with desired traits by the 1910s. Around 1917, artificially crossbred varieties began outperforming varieties developed through traditional methods where farmers selected promising individuals from their fields. These artificially crossbred varieties began to be widely distributed to farmers in the late 1920s and were actively promoted under Japanese government direction in the 1930s.
Transformation of Japanese rice breeding systems.
Consequently, Japanese crop breeding underwent significant changes. Until the early Meiji period, as was common in traditional agricultural society, seeds have been improved through selection and cultivation of superior individual strains by so-called dedicated farmers. That process is usually described as selective breeding. However, with the massive participation of government and universities in breeding programs since the late 19th century, traditional selective breeding, relying on individual efforts, was gradually eclipsed by a systematic approach implemented by large institutions. Japanese biologists realized they could create crops with desired traits more quickly and efficiently through crossbreeding via artificial hybridization. In other words, modern scientists did not have to wait for individual strains with desired traits to appear naturally by mutation. Seed improvement became faster and more innovative, with the government investing substantial budgets to promote breeding projects at the national level. In 1893, the Agricultural Experiment Station was established under the Ministry of Agriculture and Commerce in Nishigahara near Tokyo, with branch stations in 6 locations all over the Japanese archipelago. Additionally, local prefectures have established agricultural experiment stations to collect native varieties and develop new ones. In 1904, a full-scale seed improvement program was launched at the Kinai Branch Station at Osaka under the direction of Kato Shigemoto, a renowned agrobiologist. The varieties developed by Kato through artificial crossbreeding spread throughout Japan, triggering significant and irreversible changes in Japanese agriculture. By 1916, the Kinai Branch Station had sent over 1,300 strains to local agricultural experiment stations. This reorganization of the breeding system ultimately led to the decline of civilian breeders. Modern seed improvement through artificial crossbreeding can be undertaken only by professional scientists, not by individual farmers. Additionally, controlled spaces like greenhouses that could block wind and regulate temperature were essential for efficient artificial crossbreeding. Only large organizations like governments or universities could mobilize such personnel and facilities. Gradually, Japanese farmers retreated from being agents of seed improvement to becoming recipients of new varieties provided by governments and universities.
Centralized breeding programs and their impact.
In the 1930s, new varieties developed under central government leadership began to be systematically distributed to local regions based on governmental administrative power. Beginning in 1926, the rice breeding test site project was reorganized under the leadership of agronomist Terao Hiroshi. Terao divided Japan into 9 ecological zones based on climate and environmental conditions and established designated test sites in each region. The Central Agricultural Experiment Station was responsible for artificial crossbreeding and selection from the first to third hybrid generations, while further lineage selection and trait fixation was carried out at local stations. Promising varieties recognized through this process were designated as recommended varieties by the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry for distribution to farms. As the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry monopolized the authority to designate recommended varieties, the naming convention also changed. Beginning with Norin No. 1 in 1927, subsequent recommended varieties were named with Norin numbers by the ministry. By Japan's defeat in the World War II in 1945, 28 Norin series rice varieties had been developed. As Norin series rice was distributed to farms, artificially crossbred varieties replaced traditionally selected varieties at an accelerating pace. From around 1930, the retirement of traditional varieties accelerated, while the total number of varieties cultivated nationwide decreased. For instance, around 1905, the number of rice varieties across Japan exceeded 4,000. However, as new varieties rapidly spread, genetic diversity gradually decreased, resulting in monopolistic varieties emerging in specific regions. These new rice varieties that came to dominate all of Japan naturally spread to other regions under Japanese imperial influence. Varieties from warmer regions were transplanted to Taiwan, while varieties from the colder Tohoku and Hokkaido regions were introduced to the Korean Peninsula and Manchuria. Riku No. 132 and Norin No. 1 were distributed throughout the Korean Peninsula and Manchuria, spearheading the transition to farming depending on intensive use of nitrogen fertilizer.
The propagation of Japanese agricultural science throughout the empire.
As the borders of the Japanese Empire expanded, Japanese agricultural science spread throughout these regions. Among the frontier regions of the Japanese Empire, Hokkaido was the first to demonstrate notable success with scientifically improved varieties. Whether rice cultivation would be possible at the northern end of Japanese territory was a matter of significant interest to the Japanese. In this context, when Emperor Hirohito visited Hokkaido in 1936 and ate rice grown from the locally developed Fukoku variety, it became big news for the Japanese public. Following this event, Fukoku became tremendously popular, accounting for more than half of Hokkaido's rice cultivation area by around 1940. It was also introduced to the cold climate of Manchukuo, serving as a pioneer for Japanese rice varieties. Based on their experience in Hokkaido, Japanese agronomists transplanted their scientific varieties and the modern agricultural techniques to the other colonies. Japanese agronomist Iso Eikichi, who worked in Taiwan, developed Japonica rice varieties suitable for Taiwan's warm climate. These varieties were known to Taiwanese people with the generic name Penglai or Ponlai rice after Taiwan's old epithet Horai. Taiwanese farmers embraced the Ponlai rice, although they have been historically more familiar with Indica rice, realizing that Japonica rice was favored by Japanese merchants and thus guaranteed higher income. Ponlai rice remained popular even after the demise of the Japanese Empire and the Kuomintang's relocation after the defeat in the Chinese Civil War. There is an anecdote that the President Chiang Kai-shek sent Ponlai rice to Iso Eikichi every year, even after he returned to Japan, in recognition of his contribution to Taiwanese agriculture. Meanwhile, the full-scale transplantation of Japanese rice varieties took place in the Korean Peninsula. Compared with Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula had more similarities to Japan in terms of the climate and geography. The rice traits preferred by the people of two countries were nearly identical. Thus, popular Japanese varieties could be relatively easily transplanted to the Korean Peninsula with only minor local adaptations.